Through the history of the church, there's been Pentecost after Pentecost after Pentecost after Pentecost. The church is alive because he's kept it alive. And we're 40 or so years out of the last great movement. We are right on the edge of either getting raptured out of here or seeing another great move of God's Holy Spirit. And I pray that's what we see in a great ingathering. I read, Samuel Chadwick's challenge in 1898 and 1899 that the church was in the flesh. The church had lost track of the Holy Spirit. If the church doesn't get back to the Holy Spirit, we're dead. Nothing will ever get done. And within 4 years, the revival in Wales came. Well, join us on Sunday evenings. We're praying for revival in our church, in our pastors, in our city. Pray for me. I want all the lukewarmness out of my life. And I love the revival in Wales. The revival in the late 60s was an outside-in revival. All the hippies, the counterculture, got saved and came into the church. The revival in Wales in 1903 was an inside-out revival. Believers, the church itself was revived, and it flooded out into the culture, and people were saved. We need an inside-out revival again. I don't know how to make a start. The way that one began was a man in Wales, Seth Joshua, small church. His teenagers were meeting. In that day, you didn't have Instagram, you didn't have, Madden, you didn't have fantasy football, that was their social life. They came to a thing at the church for teenagers, for youth. And of course, the pastor said, Seth Joshua said, now look, why don't you guys tell me what Jesus means to you? And like teenagers, they were all uncomfortable. Everybody sat there and looked at each other. And finally, one boy said, well, Jesus is the light of the world. And Seth Joshua said, that's not what I didn't ask what he is. I said, what does he mean to you? Everybody just sat there quiet. And finally, a young girl between 15 and 16 stood up, had gotten saved 3 weeks before that. And she looked at everybody and she said, all I know is that I love Jesus with all of my heart. And she began to weep, and the people at the meeting began to weep. And the fire ignited and began to burn. A young man named Evan Roberts, in seminary at that point in time, told his dean, it's on my heart. I need to go to my church. God has given me something to say to my church. He was 23 years old or something. And the dean said, well, you need to go do that then. So Evan Roberts came to the church, said to the pastor, I need to talk to the congregation. God's given me something to say to him. Now that's every pastor's delight when a 22-year-old comes to you and says, give me the pulpit. God gave me something to say to the church. So the pastor did what I would probably do. He said, well, why don't you come to our prayer meeting tomorrow night with about 18 older women there, and I'll let you address them. So Evan Roberts came the next night, and when the prayer meeting was over, the pastor introduced him and said, our young brother, Evan Roberts, feels like he has something from the Lord to say to us. And he shared what was on his heart. And the fire began to burn brighter. It got to the point where all the churches in Wales were packed. J. Edwin Orr says, the last time I was to a Graham Crusade, there were 40,000 people there, 5,000 churches represented. That's 8 people from each church. That's not even one full pew in the front of the church. He said, compare that to Wales, when every church was filled 7 days a week, every aisle, every window, outside every church, people couldn't get in. He said, that's revival. He said, just think of that. And it began with this flame. Jesse Penn Lewis, writing for the London Times, heard about this teenage girl and Evan Roberts, and she wrote in the London Times, there's a cloud the size of a man's hand arising in Wales. There's a cloud the size of a man's hand arising in Wales.